So as of now, the 5th for OpTic is still a situation that has not been solidified. Of course, right now, JasonR is trialing as the 5th for OpTic Gaming for that in-game leader position, as well as just being one of the other rifles on the team. But there's no way to know just yet that that's in fact going to be the long-term option for OpTic. We've seen a small sample size of online play, some good and some bad, and we're going to get to see him debut on LAN with OpTic at the CS Summit event, though of course he will not be able to go to IEM Sydney, and they will in fact be using Hazed as a stand-in for that event, who also is on trial as the team's head coach, as of course Peacemaker had departed the team after trialing as a coach for some time, as well as of course Hiko departing the team after a trial that took place when there was some, I guess you could call, trade scenario going there where Stanislaw went from OpTic to Liquid and Hiko went from Liquid to OpTic, played a couple of events, didn't really work out, and now we're at where we are now. And of course, OpTic is a team that is big for North American Counter-Strike right now, particularly in the recent past. When you think about some of the results they put together, which are some of the best results that North America has had all time in CSGO and even in the Counter-Strike franchise at large. And I won't go too heavy-handed into these results or thinking about OpTic's past. I've already done quite a lot of content on that. You know, I did a video about OpTic rising up, you know, a few months ago, back when they were doing well at ECS and E-League and things of that nature, and talking about how they were able to do it, what some of the strengths of the team were, as well as some of their shortcomings. And I also already did a video when Stanislaw left OpTic for Liquid, and talked a bit about that move and some of the struggles that OpTic were going to have going forward and all that good stuff. So I don't want to get too much into the past, you know, but it is certainly true that OpTic were doing some great things, you know, particularly starting even at ESL1 New York, whenever they were able to get some nice best-of-1 victories there against, I believe that was G2 and Astralis, if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, from there, they go on to win Montreal in pretty cool fashion. They go on to win E-League Season 2. They obviously had that rough patch at Open Winter for DreamHack, but then they followed it up pretty quickly with the second place finish at ECS Season 2. And then, of course, going into this year, they were able to qualify for the major, but then struggled to do well there. They were one of the, you know, first teams to get eliminated, for example. Didn't do, you know, so hot, and that's when Stanislaw leaves. And, of course, since then, they had some rough outings over at Vegas and IEM Katowice with the whole Hiko stand-in situation and testing out different in-game leaders in that process, right? I think for Vegas, I think NAF was kind of doing the in-game leading, if I'm not mistaken, with, of course, Peacemaker aiding as a coach. And then at Katowice, I believe it was Mixwell who was doing a lot of in-game leading, with, again, Peacemaker being kind of the coaching backbone in that situation as well. And now we're kind of left with OpTic and Limbo trying to sort things out. And I guess it's fair to say that OpTic has done some good things in this scenario. You know, they've been able to retain some talent, which is big because they almost lost Mixwell and rushed to Liquid. Now, granted, that would have made a sick team on paper in the North American scene if you would have had a team that could have had Stanislaw as the in-game leader, and you would have had Rush and Elige as some type of entry combo. You would have had Mixwell as this opper hybrid who can do a lot of sick opping but can be big with the rifle in his hands on 5 rifle rounds. And then you would have had, I guess, presumably Nitro on that team as a 5th, as maybe more of a supportive player, maybe putting him into another role, you know, trying him out in a different capacity to see if that he could be a part of the team, or maybe they would have gone a different route for a 5th. Who would have known? So point is if you're an OpTic fan, or if you're OpTic, it's great that you retained Mixwell and Rush, and now you have those talents still on your team. And so basically, yeah, you lost a key piece in Stanislaw, the in-game leader who was kind of holding everything together, and who was quite a skilled player in his own right as an in-game leader. But you still have a lot of the things that made OpTic great before. You still have Mixwell, who's one of the best oppers competing in the North American region right now, and his flexibility as a rifler is something that really no other opper competing in the NA region in the current time can really stand up to in the same way that he can. Just the impact he can have on T sides with the rifle, helping opening up bomb sites, or just being an impact player with rifles, and same with CT side, of course, but you really see it on T side with the AK just being kind of another added factor to entering with a Rush or with a Tarek or something like that. So you still have that strength, right? You still have Rush, who's one of the best entry fraggers in North America. Still have that tool in the box, so to speak, for OpTic. You still have someone like Tarek, who's incredibly skilled and versatile in his own right, and what roles he can play. He can pick up the op a little bit as well. He's maybe not as consistent as a force when it comes to impact as maybe a Russian and Mixwell, but certainly still a guy worth having around that does have a really high skill ceiling when he's feeling he can do well. And you have Naf, someone who's young, who's fiery, who can be a bit inconsistent, but when he is hitting his peak, he definitely can have substantial impact. And he's still, quite a skilled player, even if the performances can definitely be up and down at times. He seemed to hit a pretty nice streak of consistency when they were having their big runs at E-League and ECS and things of that nature. But, afterwards you could see the up and downs again. So really hard to know. Point is, there's still a lot there for Optic. They've retained some strengths. They still have a lot going for them. It's also worth noting that in this moment, things could work out with JasonR. It really could. Maybe JasonR can develop into being a pretty solid in-game leader, and maybe things seem to work. It seems like the environment's good. They seem to like each other for now. It seems like the fans have taken a liking to JasonR, and so it seems like the community surrounding this whole scenario with JasonR could in fact work out. And so what I'm about to do when I start making these ideas for options for Optic is not a knock against JasonR. Again, if all things work with JasonR and Hazed as a coach, and that combination of 6 people work out, as well as the fact they were able to retain this Adria guy as the manager, who a lot of people felt was having a positive impact on the team. How much of an impact is hard to know. It's always hard to gauge like what a manager is really doing, if he's really helping in game a lot, if he's helping with relationships and team environment. That's so abstract to really know. That's really something that only can really be known internally. You can obviously hear things in interviews and talk shows, or from the players themselves, or maybe on their personal streams or in interviews or what have you, but you really just can't know. It's really hard to measure that. But certainly if they felt that was added value, they've been able to retain that as well. Certainly good stuff too. But I did want to talk about what are some other options for Optic if this whole JasonR situation doesn't work out. And maybe even talking a little bit about Hazed as a coach, because obviously himself doesn't have a whole lot of in-game leading experience. He did a little bit there for CLG at the end, but doesn't have a lot of experience doing it. And of course, this is his first, time taking a stab at coaching. And so you have to kind of think about, what is he going to be able to do for the team? Again, that's also going to be very hard to measure though, isn't it? Because same reasons why it's hard to measure what Adria can do, unless the coach is truly the in-game leader for the team, which isn't really possible anymore. You can watch the team play and see how they perform, but you never really know how much value to assign to the coach or the in-game leader in situations like that. Obviously, certain in-game leaders or coaches have really big reputations for being great tacticians and strategists and things of that nature, and so in those scenarios it becomes a little bit easier to map out what's really going on. But in a situation where you have a fresh coach and then JasonR, a fresh in-game leader, really hard to know, exactly who is driving the ship, who has the most responsibility, who has the most impact, and who to assign the most credit to if things are going well and how the team is run, or if it's just a complete team effort where everyone's pitching in like some type of democratic system where everyone's kind of having a go at the direction of the team. But I think it's worth noting what other options are on the table for Optic if, in fact, these things don't work out. I'm mostly going to focus on a 5th player as opposed to the coaching role with Hazed as far as when I'm thinking about options for Optic going forward. So one option for Optic, and I'm going to kind of start out with realistic options, and then even some of these options, though, I don't know how realistic they are, right? Because I don't know about contractual limitations or financial ties that would maybe be like a barrier to these types of things happening. So, it's really hard to know exactly what the limitations are, what the parameters are that I have to work in when I'm thinking about options as well. Some of these are going to be pretty reaching, right? They're going to be pretty out there, but it's just some things to maybe think about, kind of a cool thought experiment, right? So the first option is bringing daps back. Now, this one probably seems like a really popular one, probably. I think daps did a lot of good for Optic, and even dating back to when they were Conquest. And he's really proven that he is a good in-game leader when it comes to implementing the basics and fundamentals on a team. He's really good at setting up a default, getting people in the proper roles, and making sure the team's working together in default, working into mid to late round situations, and maybe playing a slower, more methodical style. But he also can introduce later on some pacing changes, maybe add in some fast executes. But usually usually they're going to be pretty standard ones, right? But it's all about making sure that they're crisp, the timings are good, everyone's on the same page, and it's done in a disciplined manner. And so that's really like daps' strength, it seems. It's just really grinding fundamentals and basics and making sure that everyone's working together and doing things at the right time and just, you know, making sure everyone's on the same page. And then maybe he does cherry pick some cool executes from another team. But I would say that maybe like innovation isn't like a super big strength. But again, still a very capable in-game leader. I will also add the fact that daps is the guy, for all intents and purposes, from what I've been told, that was the biggest influence in bringing Mixwell onto OpTic. So there seems to be an eye for talent there from daps as being someone who can scout talent for the future of OpTic. Maybe another roster change has to happen for OpTic down the line, and daps is one of those guys who has a good eye for kind of seeing talent and you know, giving them a chance or you know, trying to go out there when he knows options are limited and see, you know, who can I find out there. And of course he had some help too. I think that he got some help from Peter from HLTV in that particular sense on getting some ideas for names to go through, but he was still the one that went through demos, watch the player play, see what they brought to the table, you know, see how they could align with the rest of the team, and then fit them into the team. You know, even let the guy live at his house while they were trying to figure out their living situation for a while. So I think that when you think about daps as being a in-game leader who can really bring in this great standard play and make sure it's done properly, and then, you know, fit people into proper roles and scout talent and things like that, you know, really could be a big option for OpTic. Now, obviously, it might be awkward because, of course, daps was kind of ousted in the past, and I'm not really sure, you know, if the bridge was burned or if the relations are still very good between himself and OpTic, but daps certainly should be someone up there on the list of guys to consider. Again, I don't know how realistic it is because it seems like it wasn't that long ago he signed with Energy, and so I don't know what like the buyout would be or contract links or things of that nature, but certainly this should be something that's really thought about. I would also just add, if you're thinking about bringing daps, maybe you should consider Brehze too, to be quite honest. Maybe it's a package deal. You bring in daps and Brehze. Those seems to be the two brightest pieces of Energy, in my opinion, when you think about Brehze from a talent and skill perspective and potential for the future. And then you think about daps as an in-game leader, which is a hot commodity in North America because it's so rare to have, you know, truly proven in-game leaders in our region. And so that's why those two pieces seem the most valuable on Energy. No knock to anyone else there. And so maybe you do some kind of package that you bring them both over. Now, I don't know who you would remove to bring Brehze over with daps, you know, but just imagine like a Rush Brehze entry combo. I think that would be pretty damn sick, to be honest. And then you fit like the Mixwell hybrid sense, and I think there's something really there to think about. And I just kind of threw Brehze in there because, of course, he's playing with daps and Energy right now, so the relationship is building. They are working together. He's a young talent, one of the hotter prospects in the NA region as far as upcoming players and in the youth that we have in the scene. So just thought I would throw that in there as well. Again, I guess if you had to cut someone to bring in Brehze, I guess it would have to be Tarek or Naf. It wouldn't really make sense to get rid of Rush or Mixwell. And then obviously you're bringing daps in, so obviously he's going to be safe because he's one of the guys you're recruiting. So yeah, I mean, I think that you have to kind of go along those lines, but again, who knows? Let's say you don't go with that option. All right, what other options are there? Seangares has to be an option, and I think his option becomes even more likely when you consider the current climate of Misfits, where they just lost Twist, they just benched Relics, they just brought in these two French players, Vaduvic and Amanek, and so it's already a lot of moving parts going on over there, and maybe things haven't stabilized, and so at that point, Seangares is certainly maybe an option. Again, still don't know how realistic it is with his buyout and you know, contractual obligations and things of that sort, but Seangares is certainly still a guy within the North American scene that still could have value as an in-game leader. Now, with that said, I know there's the shortcomings of, oh, he's not really that skilled of a player, doesn't really put up frags on the board. To be fair, daps could be considered the same thing. And again, yeah, none of these guys may be as skilled of an in-game leader when it comes to firepower as Stanislaw was. But you have enough firepower on OpTic to where I don't know how much that would matter. I mean, you do have Rush, you do have Mixwell, you do have Tarek, who's very skilled, you do have Naf when he's hot, who can play well. So if that's the case, the backbone of your team, fragging power-wise, probably is going to be Rush and Mixwell primarily. And then Tarek is probably going to have to be that third guy, to be 100% honest, on a consistent basis in and out, unless you make some other type of roster change, like when I talked about Brehze, for example. And so if that's the case, if those guys can play strong, then you don't have to have your in-game leader be really huge. They just can't be a super-duper burden, I guess. And I would say that Seangares is about on the same skill level as a daps when it comes to firepower, it seems like. Maybe daps is getting a little bit stronger. I know he's putting in some time individually, but that's debatable, whatever. Point is, seangares still brings value to the team as an in-game leader. He's a great tactician. He himself is a guy who's very good at figuring out roles on a team. I mean, he got the most out of Shroud, for instance, when it came to putting him like as in a secondary entry role when he was on Cloud9 summer 2015. He was able to figure out ways to highlight Skadoodle on that team as well as an opper. So there was definitely, things that seangares can do when it comes to roles. He also is a guy who's very good at grinding fundamentals and basics as well, and making sure defaults are set up properly and people are working together. He has a good approach to the game that way. It feels like people always pigeonhole seangares into the fact that he's just some type of anti-strat, and that's the only value you can add as an in-game leader, and therefore he's very limited in how good he can lead because it all relies on anti-stratting and scouting his opponent, and that doesn't even work anymore. I always see this pigeonhole bullshit out there. The bottom line is that when you create a counter to a team, it doesn't mean that that counter can only be used in that very specific situation to counter the team in front of you. You can always find scenarios in future games against different opponents where that same counter can work against them because there's a similar pattern going on. There's a similar setup taking place. And so it's not as if you make a counter, you use it once, and now it's gone forever. No, that just becomes a part of your playbook, and you figure out ways to throw it in on the fly when it makes sense to do so. And on top of that, like I said, even outside of the countering and stuff, he still knows how to set up defaults and cherry-pick strats. He was the guy who cherry-picked the envious tactic where it's the fast exploding smoke out of squeaky door and you wrap around the site. They call it Veggie Rat, famously, when you look at some of the POV demos that included voice communication of the team way back when. I think that was maybe in like 2014 when those videos were around, and no event's really done it since then for obvious reasons that it gives things away, and players put a lot of pushback on that, and fair that they did. So again, like he can cherry pick tactics and put unique twists on them, and even at times bring innovations. Like there's been some things that seangares has done that were certainly unique and original to him, or at least took things and like I said, added his own flavor to it, made some subtle changes that still made it unfold differently or look different. So yeah, this guy still can be a good in-game leader in North America. Certainly the results weren't there with Echo Fox, and to be fair, I don't even know if Misfits were together enough as a 5 to really see much, and then they lost a big piece in Twist just now to Liquid, so who knows what would have really happened with that team if they could have retained Twist, and they could have kept building on the youth of Sick and Twist as a combo and things of that nature. They only played one offline event together at Vegas, and they actually looked pretty competitive in that one best-of-1 against Virtus Pro on Cobblestone. And then on Echo Fox, I just don't think seangares had enough tools to work with on that team to do anything. You can design the best damn strats in the world, but if you don't have enough firepower on a consistent basis to carry that stuff out against elite-level opponents, then it doesn't really matter. Whereas on OpTic, he would have those tools that I think have proven to be able to perform consistently. So I think that OpTic and seangares both need to see that each other may be each other's best chances at being successful for the future. I mean, as seangares, he's getting late in his career and age, and if he really wants to make one last go at doing something perhaps with a top-level team, then OpTic's probably one of his best options to do so right now. If OpTic really want an in-game leader who has a proven track record and who brings a lot to the table as a tactician and a leader, seangares has to look like an option. I'm sorry. Maybe some people will be against that, but I'm telling you that the two should figure it out, and I think that that could work. Outside of seangares, there's maybe Finesse. Again, this is probably pretty unlikely because he just joined CLG and he seems to be doing good things there. They just picked up Ricky. They just had a pretty good performance at Star Ladder. And so this is probably not that realistic of an option. But again, this is another in-game leader from the North American region. And so he's a bit more realistic than other options are going to be when you think about the international scene. And so FNS is a guy, again, who in this run with CLG has certainly looked like he's been able to, make sure the fundamentals are strong, that the defaults look good, that they handle anti-eco situations properly, that they play disciplined. Figuring out a way to balance two main oppers on his team, or at least the guys who have history of being main oppers, but finding ways to make things more flexible. Some of that may be the players themselves initiating that and not all Finesse, to be fair, but still he seems to be doing a pretty bang-up job with the current CLG with limited consistent firepower that's proven, to be fair. Maybe their online results are still up and down, but certainly a good land run at Star Ladder, and so there seems to be something there. We'll have to see how it goes in the future. And again, he's probably not a big option right now because he just joined COG and they are having some success, but he's another name in the North American region that's an in-game leader that could be an option for Optic, maybe. Just throwing that out there. I personally wasn't so impressed with Finesse on the original CLG lineup he was a part of. It seemed like they only got better when Cutler came in and started in-game leading, or when PETA came in as a coach and started taking over and driving things a lot of the time. But he still had the basics down even then, and now he looks even sharper as an in-game leader than he did before on a team that's arguably not even as strong as the original one was as far as the talent, but time will only tell that, right? So throw him down there as an option. Another option is if maybe you don't want a true in-game leader, but one who can do a little bit of in-game leading, but who's very skilled and will add more firepower to this lineup. And you go that like maybe looser approach that's really driven on skill and is just more about individual plays and not about, you know, structured play like some of these other options I've named. And that would be Stewie 2K, if that is a possibility. If you could get a Stewie 2K from Cloud9, who has done in-game leading for Cloud9 for quite some time. I think recently they said autimatic was doing some, and of course everyone's pitching in at times. But someone like Stewie 2K could be an option for Optic, maybe. Again, don't know how realistic it is because of financial things, but it's certainly a name that comes to mind if you wanted to run like a looser, more skill-based Optic. Then Stewie 2K is certainly a guy who could slot in like that, do something very similar to what he was doing with Cloud9, with maybe even more consistent firepower given current form. Arguable, of course, but a name that has to be mentioned because it is a guy who's done some in-game leading in the North American scene and maybe could work with some of the guys on Optic to make like a heavy firepower, loose style type team. Maybe you would even consider some other guys from Cloud9 as well coming to Optic and do some type of package deal where like Stu and autimatic come over, for example, or something like that. You know, it just depends. Just throwing that out there. That is certainly another option as well, where you could have the Stewie autimatic combo, and maybe that means that, you know, Tarek moves to a more supportive position or something. Don't really know how you structure it. Autimatic has a history of being able to do lurk roles, maybe Stewie and Rushier, you know, entry duo, and autimatic goes back to lurking, which he's still very capable of doing. Just again, just throwing some shit around, spitballing a little bit. Maybe that's another option. Finally, the last options I'll mention, maybe there are some European options out there. Maybe Starix sitting out there could be an option. Don't know how realistic it would be. Don't know if he'd ever want to move to North America. Probably not. It's probably not really that great of an option, but I just throw it out there. Maybe you contact him and say, hey, you interested in playing again, being an in-game leader? Starix, you know what you got. You know, maybe people will say, oh, and Navi's doing better since Starix left, so maybe he didn't really have that much value, and Zeus was there the whole time, so maybe it was really more Zeus. Maybe people are overrating Starix. Well, the same people said things about Kerrigan like that when things weren't going well with Astralis, but then he went to, you know, FaZe, and look at what they're doing now as they've made some more moves, and he slowly built that team up. So I'm just saying that a guy with a new environment, even if the last place he was at, it wasn't working out in the most recent times he was there, you put him in a new environment with a new group of people, and things can in fact work out. They still have value. They still have a good skill set. It just wasn't working out at that particular moment with that particular group of people, but it certainly could work again in another situation. So maybe that's something. And again, there's maybe other EU names that come to mind, like Pronax, like Gabi, maybe if Big doesn't work out. You know, just like some of those other names out there in the EU scene. Maybe those are options too. Those are probably less realistic than some of the other names I mentioned that are within the North American region. But again, I just thought it'd be kind of a cool thought experiment to think about what are some of OpTic's options going forward for a fifth. Again, maybe things work out with JasonR and all this is just irrelevant and useless to even think about because they just stick with JasonR and that works out and that's great. That would be awesome for OpTic, sure. But I just thought that maybe I would name some other options that are out there if in fact it doesn't work out with JasonR and you want to think about making a change with someone else. Also, there's always the option of just bringing up some other really, you know, skilled player that's really young that's out there in the NA scene and taking a gamble on someone and maybe someone else in the team tries again at in-game leading. Maybe Mixwell gives it another go. Maybe Rush decides to try. I don't know. Like there's those options as well. But if Optic wants to kind of retain things with their core lineup, which it seems like they want to do because they were able to retain a Mixwell and Rush, and you want to see what you can do to make this team, you know, kind of live up to their past and try to do things in the international scene, then these are some of the options that are possible, maybe. So we'll just leave it at that. Thanks so much for checking out this video. Please subscribe for more content.